we're going to start our public hearing on or our work session, excuse me, on the 2023 budget. I fell down and hurt my knee, and I'm on pain medication. So if I sound a little loopy, just bear with me. I'll get it right. Okay, so concerning the work session, I know we have a couple of department heads here, but does anyone from staff wish to make any comments before we begin?
No. Madam Chair, do you want us to answer the questions from the last first, or do you want to let Mr. Lomar and Sheriff Lewis, who are on the agenda, go first?
Okay. I don't have a preference, but since we've invited them to come at 6, maybe we'll just hear from them first. Okay. So is Mr. Lomar, you're first on the agenda, so good evening, thanks for coming.
Madam Chairman, Judge Schneider, as I will always refer to you, as well as Mr. Hollander, Coach, thanks for the invitation to speak to you tonight. Never turned down an invitation to talk to you all. I really just wanted to take a few minutes, it's going to be quick, and just let you know that this is year 10 for me in this office, and I can't thank you as the council enough for the way you've supported the efforts that we've made and the things we've tried to change and improve upon. You guys have been there for us each step of the way. The executive's office, Joanne, Steve, Bob, you guys have been wonderful as well. So I really just wanted to say thank you. And I have many colleagues around the state, 114 besides myself, and I know that they do not always get the support from their commissions and their council that I do, and that's something I'm grateful for. I am forever grateful that I get to work with these fine ladies and gentlemen of the law enforcement community, and you guys have put us in a position to, I think, be the leaders in the state and certainly within the region for what we do. So I just want to say thank you.
Appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions for our prosecuting attorney? Okay, thank you for being here. Good to see you. Okay. Do we have any other department heads who
The sheriff.
have indicated? Michelle?
The sheriff.
Oh, the sheriff, I'm sorry. I thought you said Michelle. She usually comes up, but I don't see her today. Hello, Sheriff, how are you?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Congratulations on your reelection.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for the invitation to come. I plan to be just as short as Mr. Lomar. I too wanted to pass along my appreciation for your continued support, as well as the executive's office. I did send an email in response to your invitation to come to the meeting this evening. I watched the last work session. In fact, actually, I watched it twice because I thought maybe I missed something. It was a little bit entertaining when I had a flashback to the Obamacare when it was said that we need to pass the budget to find out what's in it. So that was interesting. So I just wanted, again, I think when the executive sent out the letter informing all the county employees about that they were taking this survey situation, salary survey, under consideration, I think when the employees listened to the presentation, and then when they got on the internet and looked at the actual numbers, you know, there was some concern. I've been peppered with questions. I think the presentation said that the county's payroll was going up over 11-something%. When you do the math in the sheriff's office payroll, it's only 5.3%. So again, I think expectations were raised with the letter, and when it was the conversation about the 2% cost of living and the 8.7% inflation, I think there was some concern on behalf of the employees. So I just wanted to share that information with the council and would entertain any questions if you have any.
Do you want to have a question? Yeah.
You sent out some questions last week or week before. Do you know, Joanne, maybe that's in this packet here, were those addressed, part of these questions here?
There was an email directly back to the sheriff in the discussion of the things that he raised.
That might be number 9 on this one too, though. Did you get your answer?
I did, I did get a receive a response, yes.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about all that later, about the corrections and officers and that as well, so, yeah, I'm interested to hear.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, I don't believe there are any other department heads present, so I guess, is Sam here this morning? Hi, Sam. Did you want to make a presentation for us?
Yeah.
Do you want to address the questions first, or?
You mean Mr. Brazel's questions? Why don't we do so out of the last council meeting, and Councilman Brazel and I spoke the next morning, and I suggested to him, in order to give you all a better understanding of how the years of service plus the study of the positions would change certain jobs, that we give you several examples. And so we talked about doing several from highway, police department, sheriff's department, spattering of the other departments as well. So we've got those, and Samantha's going to go through those with you. And then Councilman Cronin had raised that he wanted to know particularly what was going to happen with the sergeants in the police department. As you know, for 3 or maybe 4 study rounds, since we study them every year, they're always teetering right on the brink of whether or not they should move up a classification or stay where they are. So we went through, Sam will be going through that. And then similarly, there was a question about the street maintenance workers over in the highway department. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll give you a breakdown by years of service. And I think Councilman Hammond had asked particularly about who's only getting 2% and why. So we'll go through that. And then after we go through the conversion results, Councilman Brazel had also asked, should employees, after they're promoted in the future, go to the same percentage of penetration in the pay range, or, how was that going to compare with our new 10% and 14%? And so we have several examples of that to show you about how. So Samantha will go through those, and there's a copy of them on your desk, but it'll be up on the board for everybody to see.
Did you see the email that I sent you about the sheriff's question, where I was asking why is corrections and the sheriff's department at a different pay level than the rest of law enforcement in the county? Did you see that email that I sent?
I did not, I apologize.
Okay.
But the answer simply would be, as for every position, the sheriff puts together a job description of what his employees actually do. Sam then study those, not by title, but by the components of that. And then those are compared against similar components in the community. And based upon that, they're established in the pay plan.
So for like corrections officers, we'd survey other corrections officers and see what their pay is. Their job duties are not similar, so we have to make sure that we find comparisons with those doing similar job duties.
I think in the sheriff's email, talking about, and the thing I was asking about, why couldn't you move bailiffs to what corrections are at? And why couldn't you move, I'm sorry, Scott, what was your?
Field services?
Field services to police officer. Like those, that way you'd have 2 law enforcement pay grades as opposed to 4 law enforcement pay grades. And it
So
would just
again,
seem
it
to be
just has to
cleaner.
do with, it has to do with job duties. So in effect, and I'm not saying one has higher level job duties necessarily, but when we look at job duties, if one does have higher level job duties, things that they're responsible for, and we move those others into the same pay grade, they're getting paid the same, but their job duties are not nearly as high, or their skill levels or what's required of them is not as high as the other ones. So it's basically being unfair.
And
They're
you
not
could
the same.
also end up dragging down the people who are in the higher level of duties that are under their job description.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't dragging down anybody. I was just moving those sheriff's department employees specifically up. I wasn't moving anybody else. I was just moving bailiffs up with corrections, and moving field services up with
But we
police
don't
officers.
just
That was it.
randomly move people. So if people who are in corrections are getting paid certain amounts, that's what she's comparing it to.
I understand. Never mind. We're not going to go anywhere in this conversation. I feel that we're chasing our tail. So I understand the answer is no, and let's move forward.
Okay.
Well, one point to Mike's point. I think something, that we can come around to this, but some of the positions he's talking about are the ones that have the highest vacancies. So those are things that we do have to address, and we do have to understand the reason for that. So why is corrections down 30%, highways is down? It's because we're competing against other neighboring cities or communities. And so we have to, or it's, I don't know what the other reasons would be, but the fact is, we have to figure out a reason. I think one of our obligations is to make sure that these positions in jails or street department or wherever it may be, that we're not burning them out. We're not working so much overtime that we keep losing people, and I do know that's a problem. So those are things we can address later, but I think Mike's saying, and I don't want you to put words in your mouth, but there's something, the white elephants in the room is what we have to address, is why are these the highest vacated positions?
So there are significant pay raises that are going to occur, but the other thing in corrections that you will always be competing against till we do something to the premises is just the emotional impact of working in that place every
Right.
day. You know, it's, 35 years old, it's just ground in 35 years worth of issues. It's got to be rehabbed. So that's in this year's budget as well. But there's fewer people coming out of the academy. The chief can talk to this, but he's not drawing from the academy.
Right.
He's drawing from law enforcement who want to come over here. And that's one of the reasons, the police department has always been against advanced starting salaries. But what we have built in for the corrections licensed officers, the sheriff's deputies, and for the police department is for every 2 years they have an experience outside of our walls, not just our years of service, we're going to give them one. So if the sheriff goes to hire a new deputy for field services and he gets some guy who's retired from St. Peter's, he'll bring him in at year 10. Even if he's never worked for us before. Same way at the police department. The chiefs, we should probably get him up here to tell you better, but most of the people he's hiring these days are not coming out of an academy. They're coming from another law enforcement agency.
Okay, Sam, go ahead.
It's not coming up. Oh, there it is. Okay, so I've handed out to all of you the copy of the new pay plan, the pay schedule, and then attached to that, I think you've already taken a look at it, is all of our current positions, and then where they are in the current pay grade, their current min, their current max, and then what's proposed for 2023 pay grade, 2023 min, and 2023 max.
Okay.
Where's it gonna go? Sorry, oh, there it goes. Okay. So the proposed pay schedule was created with the idea that a consistent merit increase of at least 2% above any COLA increase would be given each year moving forward. 2% was chosen as it is the most sustainable, meaning that it's something that we hope the county will be able to prioritize after any other necessary obligations are met. For comparison, Evergreen created their current pay schedule with a consistent 3% merit increase in mind. Obviously, that's not been something that's been sustainable, which is why we're having this compression issue we're seeing now. Last time we met, the question was asked, how does the current or the proposed pay schedule compare to our current pay schedule? Our current pay schedule is broken into 3 pay bands, pay band A, pay band B, and pay band C. With a consistent 3% merit increase, employees in pay band B, which is grades 202 to 210, remember this is of our current pay band, are expected to reach the top of their range in 20 years. The proposed pay group C, which is C1 through C9, is the closest in comparison to pay band B. So I'm going to use that to kind of move forward and show you what the comparison would look like. At a consistent 2% merit increase, employees in this group can expect to reach the top of their range in 20 years. That's with a 2% increase. Now, Evergreen, the one we created now, that pay band B would do it with a 3% increase every year, would get to that top of the range, take 20 years. However, if we were to apply 3% like Evergreen proposed, then those people would reach the range in 14 years. So that C1 through C9 would max out, reach the top of their range in just 14 years. Again, the movement through the range is dependent on a consistent merit increase. A 2% increase is the minimum that can be given to allow for movement. If more is given, obviously they'd reach the top of their range much faster. So that kind of gives you a comparison to where we are now to what we're looking at in this proposed pay schedule.
Councilman Hammond asked before the meeting a little bit about this, and to Sam's point, is if we had no appreciable inflation next year, and we were able to do a 3 or 4% raise, people would obviously start to move through the range much faster. But it's got to be on top of whatever we determine the cost of living is, because the cost of living boosts the entire ranges up from start to finish, as well as give people that percentage. But it's only by giving the merit on top of that that you actually move people through the range.
So both are important, but we have to make sure that whatever we do, the merit's the one that actually moves them through the range.
Sam, I might have missed this, but the minimum is the start, and then the midpoint, what is the year at midpoint? Did you say that?
So for B, the B group, are you asking to get through the whole?
Oh, I see. So, okay. I see, I read that in here. It's going to be different for categories for 18, 20, okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. Okay. So the following, I'm going to show you some real samples of what the conversions look like. These are real employees. They just don't have their names attached to it. If you remember from our last meeting, employees were placed in the new ranges looking at years of service and where they would be if we had given them a 2% consistent merit increase for the entire time that they've been here. So we took a look at that and we placed them in their pay grades accordingly. And so hopefully you guys you see that okay. So in the first example, you'll see that this is someone from the recorder. They're a GSR2. They have 4 years of service with the county. They were currently at $35,958.80. They would move to pay grade B3, which would raise their salary to $38,915.76, or 22.22% of the range. So they would receive a total increase of $2,956.96. So this is what we would expect, since the pay band B takes about 18 years to reach the top of the range. So with someone with only 4 years of service, it makes sense that they're at 22.22% of the range. But you can really see that when you look at the next one, the code enforcement inspector at 10 years of service. Since the C pay grades, the C1 through C9, should take 20 years to max out, this person at 10 years, we would expect them to be range penetration of 50%, and that's exactly where they are. And you can see that they would receive an increase of $11,703.82. And this just keeps going to give you some examples. Another clear example is if you go down to the System Tech 2 with 5 years of service, you'd expect them to be at 25% of that C range, and that's exactly where they fall. You can see by looking at this, the total increases obviously differ, but it's quite a bit for most of those individuals we'll be receiving moving forward in the new pay grades. Here are some other examples. Looking at the corrections, someone who's 23 years with a C pay grade, you'd expect them to be maxed out, and that's exactly what you're seeing. Someone of 3 years, they're at 15% of the range. At 15 years, 75% of the range, and it just keeps going on. So this gives you a clear idea of what it will look like. I do want to move down to the lieutenant because they're in a D1 pay grade. At a D1 pay grade, they should be maxing out around 23 years, and at 33 years, that's exactly what you're seeing.
And that's in the sheriff's office down there.
And that's in the sheriff's office. And then there's just a couple more examples for you of this. A detective who's been here for 26.5 years should be at the top of their range, and again, you're seeing that. A sergeant at 22 years, they're for a D. Remember I said about 23 years to max out, so that's exactly what you're seeing, 95.65% of their range. And the list just keeps going on, but I wanted to give you guys some examples of what it looks like when we're moving forward. Again, these are real individuals, and this is what they're getting for their increases with the conversions.
So the midpoint, it talks about what the top of the pay grade, but is the midpoint 10 years for all categories? Or what's the midpoint, 50%?
So for the B group, it takes 18 years to get through, so you should be at the 9 years, you should be at the midpoint.
So it's all of them around 10 years?
Yep, and the next one would be 10 years and so on.
So it's not arbitrary, it's just whatever the equation is by time served?
Exactly. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. So now I want to do some highlights because I know it was questioned about the sergeants. For the police sergeants, the reason, like Joanne said, that you're seeing such large numbers is because they have been on the cusp of moving for several years now. With this survey data that we received this year, a lot of municipalities are making major changes, and so with that survey data, it made sense for us to go ahead and move them. With their lateral entry and all that, you're seeing the average increase for a sergeant is $26,697.28. The highest increase is $40,844.73, and the lowest is $15,220.26. And then, so they'll be moving into the D2 category. For the street maintenance worker 2 positions, the group was reclassified 2 years ago. So after analysis of this position, we could see that there was no major necessary changes for this group. So they were slotted in, and that's why the average increase is $6,339. The highest is $15,339, and the lowest one is $1,695. And this does, of course, include new hires too. So that's why you're not seeing such large numbers there.
What classification is that, Sam, the street workers that you just talked about? What is that, a C?
The street.
Yeah.
C2?
They are.
And is it a C?
If you found.
Do you know?
Oh, sorry, it's C3.
C3?
Street maintenance
So is that,
worker
at
two
that
is
10-year
C3.
mark, at that number of 53,000, is that going to be competitive with all other cities? And at this point, is it going to be competitive?
We believe it is. Now, I want to just kind of point out that there's a lot of things happening with the municipalities around us. A lot of them are making changes, and they're kind of being secretive about it. They're telling us what they were, but not necessarily where they're going. So we're having to go with a lot of assumptions based off of the ones that we can get. So right now, we think that this is competitive. Okay. So additional things, we have 980 active total employees, so that does not include vacancies. That's the actual FTEs we have. Of that 980, 133 of our employees will receive only that 2% increase. I know that was questioned before, and that's these individuals. So that makes up roughly 14%. The reason for that is advanced starting salaries. We're seeing quite a bit of those. New employees, so they could be at the start of their range, and so therefore they don't have years of service to contribute, so they're not moving. Or adjustments per 115,670. So they may have had internal equity issues, and they went ahead and made those adjustments, and I think you've all seen some of those adjustments come through. So the breakdown of that 133 employees, anyone from 0 to 5 years of service, that makes up 78% of that 133 employees, or 104. 5 plus to 10 years of service is 16%, or 21 of that 133. 11 years of service to 20 years of service is 6%, or 8 of that 133. And then there's no one in the 20 plus category that is getting just a 2% increase. So additional information. So of that 980, so no longer looking at just the people receiving 2%, now looking at as a whole of that 980, 180 employees will now be at the top of their range after, if this goes through, they'll be at the top of their range. Further breakdown, 0 to 5 years of service makes up 434 employees with an average increase of $3,853.66. 5 plus years of service to 10 years of service is 178 employees with an average increase of $7,288.57. And 11 years of service to 20 years of service is 190 employees with an average increase of $12,613.21. And the 20 plus years of service is 178 employees with an average increase of $14,185.32. All right, any questions about those numbers?
I have a lot, but I need to wrap my head around it first.
Okay. All right, so the next slides relate to promotions. I know that was a question before. It was requested that we examine the impact of slotting promoted employees into the same relative point or range penetration as they were in their prior to promotion. So for example, if someone is currently at 80% of their range, when they go to be promoted, they should be at 80% of their range. So these examples show what that looks like. You'll see that slotting employees in based on this method does have some negative impact on lower pay grade employees and employees that move up just one pay grade for their promotion. Kind of hard to see. So on this first example of that GSR2, if they were to go to a GSR3, we would take their new converted salary, so this were to happen next year. Their new salary would be $38,915.76. They would go from a B3 to a C1 with our traditional 10% as we have it in the PAP because it's one pay grade move. They would go to $42,807.33, which would take them to 30.96% of the range. They're currently at 22.22% of the range. If we were to put them at 22.22% of the range, they would actually go down $1,576.33 to go to $41,231. However, if it's multiple pay grades, it does benefit the employee. So you can see in the next one, at Info Systems, if they would go from a Systems Tech 2 at a C5 making $55,731.37 to a C8 at 14%, they would go to 5.94% of the range. They would receive an increase of $7,802.39. If we were to put them at range penetration, they would receive an additional $5,701.23. So again, this putting them at range penetration does have a big impact, and it's not necessarily something that's mathematical. We can't guarantee everyone's going to get 24% or whatever. It all just varies based off of their range penetration.
So Sam, according to your first example, you're saying that if you're, what kind of a job is that? Like a street maintenance or what
That's a government service rep.
Okay, so if you were to take that, if you had that job and you were to get that promotion, then you would take a negative pay hit.
So right now, the way we have it set up in the PAP, they would get a 10% increase. So they would not go negative, they would go higher. But if we were to do a range penetration, so they're currently at 22.22% and apply that, they would go negative in that situation.
So with the new pay plan, is that corrected to
Yes.
the first scenario?
So, no, well, we do that 10% and 14% currently.
You put that in last year,
Yeah,
Councilman.
you did that.
I see,
You
so,
made them
okay.
10 and 14% instead of 5 and 8.
I gotcha, okay.
Yeah, so last year it was voted on to increase them from where they were.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
So these are just examples if we just did straight range penetration based off or in comparison to what we actually currently do.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so the next example of corrections, again, because it's going up multiple pay grades, if we did range penetration, yes, it would be a positive impact on those employees. But you would see quite a change in their pay by $16,632.59. So that's a big increase to the personnel budget. And then again, if we were to do just one pay grade, if it just went up one, as you're seeing with the corporal and the sergeant, it would be a negative impact on the employee to do range penetration. And in this example, because they are either a lower pay grade, as you're seeing with the B1, B2s, or again, back to back, it all has a negative impact. And I didn't point this out, but you can see that I gave you the increase from current by percentage and dollar amount, and then what that difference would look like in comparison. So the difference would be that $1,573.02. And then lastly, this just shows you when they are pretty far in their range, even if it's a one pay grade, because they're high up there, they're the top, they're in the Ds. Even though it's a one pay grade difference, it's still, it doesn't matter. That 10% that we would traditionally do doesn't have a negative impact. It's exactly the same whether we do that traditional 10% or move them to their pay grade, it's still a 10% increase.
So on the sergeant, you get promoted to lieutenant, you get 20 years in, and you're a sergeant, you get promoted to lieutenant. I can't read those numbers that far, I mean, so what?
Okay, so I totally understand because I'm having a hard time too. So that sergeant, being that they're 22 years, The Ds are high up there, so they're already pretty far at 120, 103, 89. If we were to move them and give them that 10% traditional increase we would normally do, that'd put them at 132, 114. If we decided to do range penetration, like we had done before, that 95, 65, it's still the exact same number, because they're so far ahead already.
So then, how did they get caught up? Then are they on their pace, on their sliding scale? Where are they? They're at 22 years. Now they started as lieutenant. Where are they in the range?
Because it's still the Ds, they're still at 95.65% in the range.
Okay.
So there's no change for them. They'd still go from 95 to 95.
And you're
Okay.
still expecting it to top out at 23.
Yes. Yeah. And then this is just the last group to show you, once again, with these lower ones, if we just do the one pay grade move, with the traditional 10% versus a range penetration, the range penetration does have a negative impact versus the 10% that we would typically do.
I think if you wanted to do something more, what you probably want us to do is to begin to move maybe the 10 and 14% to like 12 and 16 or 18%. And it's those percentages for getting that promotion that really move most people's salaries along.
Where does merit come into play in any of this, or does it at all?
Where does merit come into play?
I don't think we're doing that anymore, are we?
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think that's what we're saying, is when you declare a merit raise, it moves people through these new ranges.
Right.
When you declare a COLA, like we're doing a COLA next year, we already knew halfway through the year that we were seeing a dynamic in the market where people were starting to change after they'd already said what their new pay plan was. So we suggested next year's be a COLA. That's going to move the whole pay plan. But for most years, we need that whatever we're going to do for COLA plus a minimum of 2% for merit.
Okay. So we're not doing merit this year,
In
but we would do
23.
merit in,
Next year.
From 24 on, you've got to do merit.
Correct.
that's why I was asking, because I
Sorry,
was like,
I didn't understand the question. I apologize.
right, because, I mean, in all of this that we've talked about, we haven't talked about merit at all. So I'm like, did merit just go away forever, or just for this year to get caught up?
Just
Just for this
23
year.
because of the enormous cost of the conversion for the years of service.
Okay. Can you go back to that first example that you had of the 133 employees?
The ones who are getting just the
There.
2%.
The ones that are getting the 2%. Explain to me how a 20-plus years of service employee, oh, there's zero.
There's
Never mind.
zero.
It's tough to read. I'm really squinting at this screen
I
trying
totally
to,
understand.
trying
I
to see it.
apologize.
So, and I only wear one contact, so it's like really messing me up right now.
Well, I'm leaning onto it too, so I get it.
So we're going to have 8 employees who have 11 to 20 years of service that are going to get a 2% raise. And they would get a 2% raise because,
Most likely it's with the adjustment per 115,670. So they've already had the internal equity adjustment applied to them at some point in their career that's caught them up.
okay.
Do we all understand this 100%? It's been very helpful, I will tell you that, in showing in specific cases how this is going to affect people. So I think that's very helpful, encouraging.
One of the things that I noticed, again, you're always talking about getting, let's say 1,000 employees, Jim. 14% are going to receive a 2% raise, and I'm sure those people, because of a variety of reasons, are going to be somewhat disappointed because of the fact that, hey, we're raising most people 10% or more. But then again, we've got almost 20% of our employees that are going to be getting, $14,000 raises, which is, which is pretty considerable. So, you know, and again, obviously, the majority of people are gonna fall in the middle. But I think you compare the top to the bottom, and at least the number of people that are going to benefit greatly, it's, you know, obviously 20% compared to 14.
Yeah, I can tell you that if you just look at the county as a whole, the average increase is $8,068.70.
Sam, on the pay, you guys did that, I requested the pays across the different governments in St. Charles County. Can you put that up there, the average pays, or you got, can we show that, or you got that? Well, you don't have to show it, but.
Are you looking at PD, or are you looking at, you
Well, I was
also
just
asked for
looking
the
at-
street
well,
maintenance
PD's the one you
workers?
did, it's got the chief and all the, according to this, you guys show that we're midpoint, we're mid with everybody else, right? So we're gonna say that our pay scale is mid with all the other entities in St. Charles County. That's fair to say, right?
Well, those are looking at starting salaries. So again, we go by the midpoints. The request was for the starting salaries. So yeah, our starting's probably around the middle road.
Okay, so if that's the middle road, and then so we're doing a 3%, technically you're doing a 3% increase every year, about, right? Is that about right, to keep up with?
2% is the minimum.
2% is minimum, and 3% is about the average? So
Yeah.
it's 2%, the cost of living is about 2%. So if it is the average 3% is what we're going about, or would you say 2% for most of the employees?
Oh, for what percentage most employees get?
Yeah, the whole across the board, the average is about 2% or 3%?
So for everybody across the board, the average, and that includes people who are just getting a 2%, the average is 13% increase this year.
That's to get everybody up to where they're supposed to be,
Right,
though.
right.
So that's just to get them where they are. And then then we're saying, okay, now you're good. This is where you should have been, or this is
Right.
where we agree to retain all of our employees. So then from that point on, when you get them to where they need to be, then it's going to be 2% or 3%
So-
every year almost.
Yeah, so in order for us to keep moving them through through the pay ranges, they have to get at least a 2%. A 3% is gonna move them through faster, a 1% is not really gonna move them at all, so they have to get a minimum of a 2%, so.
A minimum of 2%, right.
And
So
that's on top of whatever COLA
I started
you
to say,
determine.
that's on.
So that's
You're
fluctuating.
gonna get cost of living first, whatever that is. Then you'll get a minimum of 2% to get you through the pay range in 20 years.
Right, so whatever
Or
we do for
14 if
COLA,
you
we have
did
to
3
basically do
years.
2% more on top of that.
3%.
Oh, so, okay, so I want to understand, that's good. So you're saying everyone gets the COLA, whatever that establishment is.
Right.
And then the 2 or 3% on top of that.
Yes,
Okay.
because the COLA is gonna make them stay in that same range penetration, there's not really any movement, because the entire pay grade is moving. We have to add that merit increase on top of it to counteract what the COLA is doing.
I got you. Okay. Okay. As far as the other averages, this is helpful, this thing you guys did here. It does show us to be in the middle of the pay range for police chief, captain, lieutenant, sergeant, and police officer. Is it gonna be similar? And I'm not gonna ask you to, well, you did, okay, I see. You did do the street, I just got this just now.
I know, I'm sorry, yeah.
No, that's okay. The maintenance, street worker, 1 and 2, so we're pretty much in the average of that as well. So you guys are gonna just pick midpoint, be average, which,
Yes, so moving forward, right now, well, prior to this year, we always looked at 50% of the midpoint. Moving forward, we want to go 60% of the midpoint. So we want to be a little bit higher than we were doing before.
okay.
What about the positions that are hard to fill? So, for example, a corrections officer, right?
So those individuals, like the really hard to fill ones, and police officers, corrections, those types of things, we actually analyze those every year. So if we have to make changes, we will. And we'll know more, again, you know, whenever other municipalities give us that data of what they decided to do, then we'll know for sure if we need to make more, you know, movements later on.
It's not like there's a lot of extra data points from other municipalities you can grab for corrections officer.
No, there's
only
not, yeah.
so many counties that have them.
That's
so-
true, yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask you, so our present employees with this system that we are proposing to pass, have they been made aware of what their raises is gonna be?
No, they
at
have
this
not.
point?
No.
And when will that happen?
That typically happens after it's all passed. We send out a conversion memo that lets them know, here's where you were, and here's where you're going to be at the new pay schedule.
Because I can see, you know, I mean, it would be very easy for them to call you and you explain to them, say, hey, I only got, you know, only got a $3,000 raise and most everybody got 9,000. And you would say, okay, well, explain why that occurred on an individual basis. But I think at this point, you know, the same thing that we've discussed before is that, you know, them not knowing until we pass it, okay, I think creates a little bit of uncertainty and a little bit of mystery that.
We don't need.
Which I don't think is very transparent, okay? So, you know, and I don't know if there's a way to get around that.
I agree with you 100%, Terry, that we should, as soon as this is available, say this is the proposed pay raises so that people get a chance to look at it. But I don't know why there's so much secretive about this thing.
Well, does it depend on the fact that, like, if everything stays the way that it's currently proposed, you know what everybody's raise is going to be, right? If the budget that we currently have is the budget that we pass, there's no real secret as to what's going on. The question really is, what are we going to monkey with in terms of moving dollars that's going to affect what those pay raises are going to be? Is that fair? So I think the thing they're waiting on is for us to say, yes, we're good with this budget. As long as we're good with this budget, you know what everybody's pay raise is going to be. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, I mean.
So the reason why they can't tell everybody right now, this is what your pay raise is going to be, is if we decide to change something in this budget, it is going to change the amount of money that's going to be available that people are going to be able to have. So I think the reason why there's a lack of transparency, it's not necessarily a lack of transparency, it's we're in the middle of still approving this, and if we make any changes, you still have X amount of dollars that you're going to be able to spread among all the employees. If we move stuff around, you change that pot. When you change that pot, you're going to change the raises that we currently have allocated for everybody. So it's not necessarily transparency. It's the fact that I can't tell you this is what your raise is going to be, and then the county council decided to move $150,000 around, which completely changed the amount of money that I had. Therefore, your $5,000 raise just became a $4,300 raise because we needed to move it to here or there. Am I understanding this correctly?
That is correct.
Yeah, but
Okay.
my point is that with salaries being such a huge part of the budget,
Right.
us moving $150,000 it would be a big deal, except for that it's not going to affect.
It's just an example.
Okay, yeah.
It's just an example of me.
Yeah.
I pulled that number out of thin air,
Okay,
right?
okay.
So it's wherever. I don't know what it would cost to move all of Scott's people from the two separate pay ranges that are only with the sheriff, and we move them to the corrections and police, and we have two pay ranges. I don't know what that would cost, right? I'd like for that to happen, but I don't know what that would cost. So if I understand what that would cost, that's going to affect the overall dollar amount that we currently have allocated.
I understand.
So that's going to change that. If you do that with X amount of, people in highway or IT or whatever, that's going to change that dollar amount. So I understand why they can't tell everybody, because we haven't said go. Once we say go, it sounds like you're going to be able to tell everybody what they want. So everybody's kind of waiting on the
Yeah,
seven of us.
Yeah, my question is, if somebody called you tomorrow and say, hey, listen, county council, what has been presented to them, if that passes, could you tell me what it looks like I'm gonna be making next year? You could probably do that fairly quickly, couldn't you?
Careful how you answer that. You're about to get 980 phone calls.
What I was going to say is I would probably tell them I would not answer that question at this time because it wouldn't be fair for me to give one person that information without giving everyone that information.
Okay.
Isn't it fair to say, though, this pretty much says what the salaries are, Joanne, isn't it?
They should have a good idea.
That tells you what the range is.
If they know
Right, but it's I mean,
apparently
it's gonna
we've
be
had some
close,
people in a
right.
couple of the departments taken pretty good guesses at it, and there's
You should
been
be
some
able to
rumors
kind of back
going on.
into it based on your years of service and pay grade.
Is this available for the employees to see?
It comes out Friday, that's why I offered that, since you're gonna get it in, it'll be up on the website on Friday, that we just bring it tonight.
I think for my position is, I think you've done a good job. It's complicated. I think that for me, I see everything here, but I think we're gonna probably let the employees kind of have an opportunity to look at it, and then we may hear some comments. It looks good to me, but there may be some stuff I'm missing in here. So I'm sure we'll hear from some of the employees on what they think of it.
I'm just curious, how much would we want to mess with it once you put that out there? Let's say you put this out there on Friday, and then you get people who pop up in and they say, well, I don't think this is fair because of this. Any change that you make at that point just made everything that we sent out to everybody null and void.
Well, I don't think so, Mike, because I'm not taking any money from anybody else. I'm gonna find somewhere else in the budget to get the money to move those people where they should be. So that's not even,
Yeah, we don't know.
I'm not
my-
gonna take any money out of salaries to change the budget, period. If anything, I'm gonna move it up.
It's like everything we listen to. If there's a legitimate reason why someone has a reasonable argument that says this isn't right and here's why it's not right, if they have a reasonable argument, then it's worth, you should listen to it. Otherwise, if it's just, complain to complain, then you pretty much know it.
Yeah, I'm not saying you shouldn't listen. I'm just,
My big
I'm just throwing
concern,
that out there.
Mike, is there's employees out there, if they had this information earlier, they may not have left in the last month or so.
well, but here's my guess. This is what you do for a living, so tell me. As soon as we do this, I guarantee you, municipalities in this county are going to adjust their schedule, and we're gonna have this exact same conversation, because we're all fighting for the same people.
That's exactly what's happening right now, yes.
So, based on kind of discussions that I've had with Chief and some others, that's kind of thing that we're doing right now, is we're stealing each other's employees. And now you're trying to figure out what's the most magical sauce I can come up with to keep my people from leaving, because the last thing I want is county to be a training ground for St. Peter's or O'Fallon. Lovely places, but I'd like for them to go get their own people and stay away from mine. But then again, we've kind of done that to them, and I'm sure they'd say the same thing.
Right.
But, yeah. I don't know what more to say at this point. You've thrown a lot out here, so I kind of like to digest it for a little bit before I go any further.
Yeah, I agree. I do have a couple of questions based on this sheet here. You said, it says, this is the percentage of vacancies by department?
Okay,
Yeah. You have, on corrections, we're defunding 15 positions in 2023?
14.
What is it?
14.
Well, why is that?
Because we can't fill them.
So, in 2020, we gave them 18 additional employees. They've never hired a single one of those because their original allocation of 79 hasn't been filled. So basically what we've done is we've put that money just sitting on a shelf. In the meantime, if the council goes forward with letting us do the rehab of the units, it will change the ratio of employees they need up there because they want to go to direct supervision. So that then, depending upon how the architects lay out the number of people in the unit, whether it's going to be 2 or going to be 3, is going to depend how many of those people in 24 and beyond we need to refund.
I see. Okay.
So we took out 14 of the 18 that we put in before.
Right.
We didn't really cut them. We still had 4 more. I realize this isn't necessarily this budget, but we talked about new jail 3 years ago? 4 years ago? Where we agreed at the point that that was the $93 million part in that work session?
Would have been $93 million.
Right.
We
And-
didn't have $93 million.
Right, we were gonna have to go bond it out or something to,
We can't bond 93 million.
I know, but we put money in it since, but at what point are we gonna be able to say, and I know this isn't you, so you can have a seat for as far as I'm concerned, but I don't want
Thank
to.
you.
At what point are we going to have a jail plan that we can move forward on to try and fix that?
If you pass this budget, Christine will, so we've got 25 in ARPA.
Right.
Which we can spend because of the high percentage of people with mental health and substance abuse diagnoses. And and then we need 15 million, which we can afford to bond, for the kitchen central core services. So around 40 million to renovate the third floor and renovate the fifth floor. If you do that, then Christine is going to put an RFP on the street immediately for an owner's rep and for then the architect services.
For what's the last part of that?
And for the architect services. So
Okay.
I'm still hoarse from them.
No, I get it. So are we thinking that we could have a plan to fix the total jail by middle of next year?
The third and the fifth floors, we would not build the new towers.
Okay.
Well, that 93 is not 93 anymore, even if we were planning to do everything. Do we even know what the 93 would be in today's dollars?
She said last week that she didn't, because what we did with the walkway, that was part of that 93, and what we're doing with the new kitchen and the other stuff, we're kind of piecemealing together, but materials now are so much more expensive than what
Yeah.
they were before.
Yeah.
In some cases, 3 times as much, she said last week, that we don't know what the new number would be to reconstruct that jail that we looked at 4 years ago.
With what we did under the CARES Act, that was 20 million, and we're looking at another 40 million now. So
Right.
we're going to have $60 million worth of upgrades in the jail when this 23 budget is passed.
Okay.
Okay, well, we have another 8 minutes left in our budget discussion. Are there any other issues that we need to bring up?
I got one. I got a question. Joanne, I sent you an email months ago. You did answer it, but, we put the resource officers in all the schools and in all the public schools. And I've been getting some questions on, it's unfair that some of the private schools don't have them, at least the high schools? And what is there, 3, 4 private high schools in St. Charles County? Is that about right? I think we looked at all the schools, and you gave me a number on all the private schools.
Right.
But is it unreasonable to say that they should be considered too? And I realize it's an extra expense we're gonna have to pick up. I think it's well worth it. I agree with doing what we did, and I agree with if it costs extra money, it costs extra money. But I think the private schools should, at least the high schools, should have them as well, because they're paying taxes and their kids aren't even going to school.
So I don't
In the public
know,
school.
I think only one of the private high schools is in an unincorporated area, unless the chief knows better.
Does it have to be, it has to be an
Yeah, we are only in the schools that are in the unincorporated area.
I see.
So,
Are we partnering funding with any of the other schools that are in the cities?
their cities do.
That's up to them.
Is up to
They're-
them 100%?
Each
Okay.
have their own policies. Some of them do it 50/50, some of them don't pay any of it. And I don't know, is anybody in the elementary schools, chief, other than us?
All the other school districts are high school and middle schools, and there's sharing elementary school that people are doing prior.
Do we have any private, do you know the answer? You don't know the answer to
We're
that?
not doing any private schools.
I know, but do we have any in unincorporated?
We have private elementary schools, like ICE is already referring to contract, but we don't have it also there.
Okay. Okay, so that
Those
would
are
be.
unincorporated?
Sorry,
Those are unincorporated?
it's contract, it's already referring to contract.
Okay.
Okay.
We're in our contracted cities, though. So anything that's in Weldon Spring or in Garden Prairie, we're in those schools too.
In the private schools?
No, I'm sorry,
Public.
not in
Public
private,
only.
just in the
But
public
it's like
schools.
Weldon Spring is, the Messiah Lutheran is in Weldon Spring, correct? And you're contracted with Weldon Spring.
We are, but we're not in any of the non-public schools.
Okay.
We're not philosophically opposed to it, it's just the funding for it.
No, I completely understand. It's just been brought to my attention that the people who are paying taxes for their schools to go to, their kids to go to public school, and they pay for private schools too, and they don't get resource officers, they just say it's completely unfair, which I can understand that argument.
I'm a
Okay.
product of that system, I completely understand.
Mr. Cronin, did you want? Yeah, we're going to take a break in a moment and reconvene at 7. Mr. Cronin, did you have a quick
I just
matter?
have one thing, and I'll sound like a broken record, but, you know, for years I've been talking about, instead of spending $60 million on the jail, figure out a way to reduce the jail population, primarily by getting the court systems to become more efficient. These people are spending a year, 2 years in jail for stuff like theft, okay, before they can get through the system and into prison or into some type of rehabilitation. So I know there's a severe shortage of public defenders. I think instead of spending $60 million in that jail, we need to look at ways to make this whole system more efficient. If they're innocent, get them out of jail. If they're fixable, then get them into some type of program. And if they need to go to prison, get them to prison instead of letting them sit in county jail for years at a time because there's not enough public defenders. So that's all I got to say now.
Okay, let's take a recess then, and we'll resume with the regular meeting by 7 o'clock. Okay, thank you for being here. And thank you to staff as well for your help.
Hey, Joanne, I ran the